Yakuza. Let's just get this out of the way. If the way I say Yakuza makes you want to jump off a building, I don't know what to tell you. I know most people say Yakuza, but I'm not just gonna change my ways all of a sudden. Yakuza, it just flows off the tongue, you know? This is my true authentic self, and I'm proud of who I am, so deal with it. With that being said, Yakuza over time has slowly become one of my favorite series of games out there. I started with Yakuza 0 3 years ago. Some of you may have seen my videos on that game already, but behind the scenes, I've been playing all of these games over the course of my YouTube journey. Why haven't I reviewed them on my channel? I don't know, but we're gonna review a bunch today, so hope you're down for that. I also thought it would be kind of fun to do a little tier list for the games too. I'll say for the most part that all of these games are really fun, but some do stand out as better than others for me. Here's the criteria we're working with. As someone who plays these games primarily for the story, that's definitely the biggest decider. However, we're also going to be looking at the combats, the style, the new stuff it brings to the series, the sub-stories and minigames, and all that good stuff. Oh, by the way, I've actually only played 0 through 5 and Judgment at this point. I still have 6 and 7 and Lost Judgment to go, and seeing to how these games have taken me 3 years to get through, I probably won't be done by the time 8 comes out. So part 2 of this tier list will come one day, but while these games are still fresh in my mind, let's talk about them. Final note, I think the plots for each following game reveals what happens throughout the series, so if you haven't played the games yet and don't want to be spoiled, probably come back to this video later. Starting with Yakuza 0, this was my introduction to the series, and I gotta say, it's a banger. The game takes place in the 80s, so Kiryu is 20 years old and he's working as a debt collector for the Yakuza crime organization, the Tojo clan. At the start of this game, Kiryu is basically at the very bottom of the food chain, doing petty jobs like debt collecting. The other character you play as is Goro Majima, an ex-Yakuza member who now works as a cabaret club owner. Between the two stories, Majima's definitely stands out as the best. After playing through the other future games, the stories end up becoming very convoluted and confusing. But in Yakuza 0, Majima's story actually shines for how simple it is. Without the politics of the Yakuza behind him, it's a very character-driven story about a man who's fighting his way back into a life of crime, only to realize that his life could be worth so much more. His relationship with Makoto is definitely a highlight of the entire series. His slow and gradual shift to protect someone he was originally sent to kill is really powerful, and you can see the ripples of this effect in later games because of it. It's tragic and also full of hope, which I think is what these games are about in the first place. Finding some beauty in horrible circumstances. It's got a perfect climax and ending that sets up the rest of the series for the characters, and all in all, I think Yakuza 0 might have the best story in the series so far. Again, I've only played up to 5 and Judgment so far, but this is definitely the perfect game to get you hooked on the characters. Combat-wise, this is also one of the best games in the series when it comes to fighting. There are 3 different fighting styles for both characters, and they all feel so unique and powerful that you never end up sticking to just one. Kiryu, for example, has Rush style, which is fast but not heavy hitting. This is good for boss fights when you need to dodge around a lot. He's also got Destroyer style, which makes him basically just a tank blowing up everything in his path. And then there's Thug style, the perfect well-rounded balance of both. There's also just so much visual style in the combat. When you hit enemies, money flies everywhere, and switching between styles changes the music and its tempo. I wouldn't say it's my favorite music from the series, but it's up there with some of the best, especially the disco and karaoke songs. Speaking of the minigames, there are so many bangers. Majima's Cabaret Club management, Kiryu's Pocket Racing. These are basically entire games built on top of Yakuza 0. I have a review out for this game if you want to check it out, but I think I've spent a little too much time talking about it, so let's just rank it. Yakuza 0 is a really special game. There's a reason why it basically made this series popular in the West, therefore it's an S tier game. I think just in terms of uniqueness, this game definitely stands out as the most different of an experience, which is a really good thing. Okay, Yakuza Kiwami, the true start to the series. Obviously it's a remake, but I'm not planning on going back to play the original. Here's what I'll say. For the rest of the series from now through 5, Yakuza Kiwami is the bare bones foundation of the entire series. If you like this game, you'll probably like all of the games. Now this is not a dig on Kiwami, but a lot of the repetitive Yakuza tropes featured in the entire series are concentrated and made very clear in this game. That might sound confusing. Let me give you an example. In every Yakuza game, there will always be a mission where a homeless guy has a secret password to an underground gambling den, and so you have to find out how to bribe him, go to a store and buy a beer, give it to him, and then get the password. What I'm saying is that between key story moments, there's a lot of fluff and padding and walking back and forth across the city just to get to the next story moment. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing because it gives you a chance to step away and experience the side content and mini games, but it's also just made really obvious in this game that it's trying to fill time. Because I had just played Yakuza 0 in the same city, it's hard to enjoy exploring when you already know where pretty much everything is. That's just a fault of playing Yakuza 0 first, but I think it was worth mentioning. Besides that though, I think Kiwami's story is really good because it's another mostly simple Yakuza story. The game starts out with a bang. Kiryu is standing over dead Chairman Dojima while holding a gun, and you're like, oh my god, who is this guy and what happened to the sweet Kiryu we know and love? We later find out that it was actually Kiryu's best friend Nishiki that killed Dojima, but Kiryu, being the angel of a man he is, decides to take the blame and protect his friend. He spends 10 years behind bars, and when he gets out, everything has changed. Nishiki is now greedy and evil, and it's up to Kiryu to discover the truth behind his friend's downfall. We also get introduced to Haruka in this game, which is the little girl that Kiryu protects and forms a strong bond with. Their relationship is really the heart of the entire series, in my opinion. Without Haruka, Kiryu would probably just accept that his life of crime is all he has. So in a sense, she's kind of the reason for his change in motivation throughout the rest of the series. All in all, I think it's the perfect introduction to the modern age of Yakuza and the games going forward, and regardless of the annoying backtracking and fetch quests, it's probably better than most games I've played. I'll put it in B tier. Compared to other games I've played, this would definitely be higher, but like I said, the whole series is filled with bangers. Next up is Yakuza Kiwami 2. Kiryu is now widely known as the Dragon of Dojima, a feared legend and fourth chairman of the Tojo clan. Despite his new infamy, he's starting his journey towards personal redemption. His new goal is to escape the Tojo clan life and start fresh somewhere else. However, it's not so easy. Kiryu is called back into action when the 5th chairman is assassinated by the Omi Alliance. Of course, the only one who can get to the bottom of this war is Kiryu himself, so he goes to Sotenbori and meets Ryuji Goda, the new figurehead of the Omi Alliance. Let me just say, Ryuji is an awesome villain. If there's one thing this series consistently does right, it's the characters. You really learn to love the heroes, and you love to hate the villains. However, Ryuji isn't a character I ever felt I hated. Every time he's on screen, he's so exciting and magnetic. While most Yakuza villains are driven by power and greed, Ryuji is driven by being a badass. He never listens to what he's told, he only follows his heart through to the end, and I think that makes him such a cool character. This is also the game where we are introduced to Daigo, who is a massive character for the rest of the series. Right now, he's a bit of a troublemaker, but throughout the game, his experiences with Kiryu mold him to become a powerful leader for the Tojo clan. We also meet Kaoru, a new love interest for Kiryu. She's also an awesome character who brings out a new side to Kiryu we haven't seen before. I'll say this, Kiwami 2 does a great job of developing Kiryu most of all. All of these characters seem to show another dimension to his character. Ryuji forces the badass out of Kiryu, Daigo brings out Kiryu's leader side, and Kaoru brings out his soft and protective side. I can go on and on, but this is really the game that made me fall in love with Kiryu as a character, and it makes the next few games feel so rewarding because of his development. Okay, so as far as combat goes, I think this is my favorite Kiryu combat out of the games I've played. It feels so snappy and satisfying. The heat actions are super over the top, and unlocking more abilities feels great in Kiwami 2. I love that you need to eat at restaurants to level up. It makes it feel like the restaurants actually have a purpose in this game. The minigames are also some of my favorites. The Cabaret Club game is amazing as always, and the grab your photo shoot for reasons. Overall, this is one of the best games in the series. I was originally planning on putting it in A tier, but now looking back on it, it's just so good. So screw it, it's an S tier game. Okay, Yakuza 3. Now, this is a tough one. I know a lot of people don't like this game, but it's not entirely its fault. This is the most outdated of the games I've played because it hasn't been remade yet. Will it ever get a remake? Probably, but for now, I think in some ways it holds up, and in others, it definitely does not. It's also kind of hard going from the masterpiece that is Kiwami 2 into a game that came out in 2009, but regardless, there are parts of this game that I really liked. So this is the beginning of a new chapter in Kiryu's life. He's finally escaped the clutches of the Tojo clan, and he's now starting a new beginning running an orphanage in Okinawa. If you've been paying attention to Kiryu throughout the series, this isn't so surprising. Being an orphan himself, he's the perfect person to take care of all these kids, you know, besides the whole crime lifestyle he left behind. I really love the mature and heartfelt direction Yakuza 3's story goes in. I love learning about all of the kids at the orphanage and their own unique problems, and how amazing it is that they have Kiryu to take care of them. It's really a beautiful story, and while it is slower than any of the other games, I still see this as an essential part of Kiryu's character. Okay, I know this is going to be a hot take, but I was not a fan of the villains in this game. I know a lot of people like Mine as a villain. He's a captain of the Nishikiyama family, but with the way it ends, they tried to do some sort of redemption for the guy, but I still hated him, especially for how he treated the orphans. Again, it's a bit unfair because Mine has to follow the awesome villain that Ryuji was, but to me, he felt pretty one note. But then again, we did get Rikia in this game, who's a small-time Yakuza that forms a close bond with Kiryu and the kids at the orphanage. So this game is really a mixed bag when it comes to characters. Now for combat, it's probably no surprise that this is my least favorite combat in the entire series. There's only one fighting style, so it gets a bit repetitive, and the enemy AI in this game is just absurd. The enemies block literally every attack. It gets really annoying, to the point where I actually had to restart the entire game halfway through just to change the difficulty. I know that it's probably mostly that I suck, but I just think this combat does not hold up well at all. The minigames are pretty standard, no huge standouts for me, so this is the first game I didn't spend too much time with. Tough to say it, but even though Yakuza 3 has a really special storyline, I think it's still around a C tier on the list of games. Yakuza 4. Now, in my opinion, this is where the storyline kind of goes off the rails a little bit. In this game, you play as 4 different characters. You have Kiryu, of course, and then the rest are new characters. Starting with Akiyama, and he's probably my favorite part of this whole game. Akiyama is a loan shark who mysteriously has a ton of money that he's willing to give away on one condition. If the person he's loaning the money to has a good enough reason and passes his tests, he will give them the money with no questions asked or strings attached. Obviously, a character like this could only exist in the ridiculous world of Yakuza, but somehow he ends up becoming the most interesting. I'm a sucker for romance stories, and Akiyama's plot is a love story. It's such a great opening for the game, and although things do end up getting pretty convoluted down the line, I'd say that his chapters stand out from the rest. We also meet Saejima, the sworn brother of our favorite psychopath Majima. Saejima is serving a prison sentence for massacring a bunch of Yakuza, and his story starts with a prison break. Without going too deep into spoilers, Saejima's story is probably the most convoluted, and to be frank, It's a bit dumb. Don't get me wrong, I did start to like his character and his no half measures attitude towards life, but it gets a little goofy. The final character you play as is Tanimura, a cop who's a little bit shady. He was fine, but I think this is where the feeling of switching characters and the strange pacing of the game really sets in. I think the series loses its focus a bit in this game, not in a catastrophic way like a lot of bad games I've played, more of like, what the hell is even happening kind of way. The combat is pretty similar to Yakuza 3, but definitely a lot better though. I did appreciate the different fighting styles like Akiyama's kicks and Saijima's brutal power attacks. These fighting styles feel very different to what we're used to, so it was a nice change of pace. With that, I'm gonna put Yakuza 4 in B tier. It's not a bad game by any means, it's just a bit too all over the place when it comes to pacing. Good news though, if you liked the confusing nature of Yakuza 4, Yakuza 5 has 5 characters and 5 new cities, and it's the longest game I've played so far. Kiryu is now laying low as a taxi driver. If I kept explaining the story at length like I was before, we'd be here forever because this is such a long game, so let me just tell you my thoughts. I loved Kiryu's story. This is yet another game where he shines. This poor guy has sure been through a lot at this point, and this is definitely the game where we see him at his most powerful. My favorite scene is where he takes on an entire army of Yakuza all by himself. It felt like all the games were leading up to a moment like this. Saijima's back, he's also back in prison again. I think that his story is a bit more interesting in this game, but being back at a prison with not much to do is a little annoying. The hunting minigame is also probably my least favorite minigame in the whole series. It's a shame because there's clearly a lot of depth to it, but I just found it slow and repetitive. We've also got Akiyama, and he's still amazing. There's a new character named Shinada, and he's really great too. There's even a section in the middle of the game where you can play as Haruka, and the whole section is dancing and singing rhythm games. I found these actually kind of fun, and although it was a little weird to throw this in the middle of the game, it was a nice change of pace. There are so many mini games and side content in Yakuza 5, so many combat styles and sub-stories and things to do. The game is massive as hell. I'd love to talk about these games in more detail in the future, especially Yakuza 5, but I think my biggest takeaway from this game is that there is such thing as too much of a good thing. This is a very biased take, but I don't usually play games this long. I even took multiple breaks throughout this one, but you can't deny that it has a lot of good stuff in here, even if it's surrounded by some mediocre stuff. I'm giving it a B tier, I think. Take it or leave it. Okay, the last game I've played is Judgment. I actually played this right after Yakuza 0, but since it's a spin-off game without Kiryu, I figured I'd leave it till the end. I'll say this right off the bat, Judgment is my favorite game in the entire series. Maybe it's because it feels so different from the other games, but I just really fell in love with Judgment. So much so that even though I've logged 100 hours playing it, I wouldn't mind going back and playing it again. Judgment follows the story of Yagami, a former lawyer turned detective who's investigating a series of murders that involve the Yakuza. So while it does take place in the same city as the Yakuza games, this is completely separate from Kiryu's story. I found the whole mystery of the serial killer so interesting all throughout. Usually in the Yakuza games you reach a point where things slow down a bit, but not in Judgment. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. There's also so many great characters, from Yagami's co-workers at the detective agency to the actual suspects themselves. Everybody is a standout in their own way. Judgment really shines though through its gameplay. The fighting is so much fun. Yagami's fighting styles add so much variety to the combat, and switching between different styles can lead to combos. It's all really great. I also really enjoyed the side content in this game. You get all the classics like arcade games, darts and gambling, and then you have deeper games like the VR board game. There's even dating in Judgment. What more could you want? I've talked about Judgment extensively in my review for it a couple years ago, so check that out if you want. For now, Judgment is sitting comfortably in S tier as my favorite Yakuza game. So that's my list so far. There's still a few more to go, plus there's a couple games yet to come out, so I'll make a part 2 to this list at some point in the future. It'll probably be a while, but I did want to talk about this series because it's slowly become one of my favorites over the past few years. What's your favorite Yakuza game? Subscribe for more videos. I hope you enjoy your day or night or whatever it is, and yeah, have a good one. Bye bye, guys.